FPL Game Week 26 best players to buy. In today's video, I'll be running through all of the best picks going into Game Week 26, including 6 players that over 90% of the FPL player base are all missing out on. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and of course, in today's video, I'll be running you through some of the best players to buy, but also taking you through some of the players that are being talked about a lot, but might not be the best players for your particular team. So as always, if you enjoy the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, but crucially, let me know in the comments below what you think of the players I'm talking about today and whether or not you agree with some of the points that I'm making. Starting off, of course, with Dango Ouattara, who has been in sensational form since the turn of the year. Another goal against Southampton with a brilliant glancing flick towards the back post, making it 1-0, I believe. And he is playing out of position for Bournemouth at the moment. Now, I think the hesitation on Ouattara has mainly been around the fact that okay, sure, he's playing really well, he's getting the goals, he's getting good data, which as you can see is continuing, but is his place secure enough that we can have faith in him over an extended period of time? And honestly, over the last few game weeks, I think he's done enough to merit sticking in that forward role for the next few game weeks for Bournemouth. Obviously, a few bad performances might change things, but they brought Jefferson back from loan. There's no real need to force him into the side considering how Bournemouth are playing right now. The system with their front four, including Ouattara in there, is working really well. It's flowing and they're winning games, importantly. And across the four, all of them are scoring goals. So there's no real need for Iraola to actually change things up right now. At 5.1 million, he's of course great value for money. And that data is more reflective of a player who's 8 or 9 million in FPL. 5.1 is a ridiculous bargain. He's under 3% owned right now, which is ridiculous. And if you look at the fixtures coming as well, starting with Wolves, who of course are in a relegation battle at the moment. Bournemouth looking towards the Champions League places right now. Bet you wouldn't have said that at the start of the season. After that, Brighton, Tottenham, both away, but both leaky. And then Brentford at home in Game Week 29 when we've got that blank game week and you're going to want to load up on players who are assured of a game in Game Week 29. Bournemouth are, of course, one of them, have a good home fixture against a team that, of course, are very capable in the Premier League, but do concede a fair few goals as well, and their defensive data isn't amazing. So you'd back Bournemouth for a couple of goals in that game, and then Game Week 30 against Ipswich is also amazing. So unless you're looking at free hitting in Game Week 29, Bournemouth midfielders, so Ouattara is one, obviously Semenyo and Kluivert, all good options. Ouattara's the cheapest and has the best data of the lot at the moment, and is starting out of position as a forward. His touches in the penalty box, his shots in and around the 6-yard box are way above anyone else right now in the Bournemouth team. I really like him. It's just whether or not he's better than the likes of Kluivert, who's on penalties, and Semenyo, who, at least on the eye, is probably the best of the bunch, in my personal opinion. Although the data's not as good, he is passing the eye test with flying colours right now. So honestly, you can't really go wrong with any of them, and I'm really highly considering doubling up on the Bournemouth midfielders. Of course, Altara's out of position. Maybe Evan Nilsson comes back soonish and is competing for that forward role, but if you're looking at wildcarding around about Game Week 31, which I know will be popular and is something that I'm considering myself, Ouattara you would think is safe for the next few game weeks, and as long as he plays in Game Week 29, there's not really much that can go wrong here. So 5.1 million, about as cheap as they get, and differential. He ticks all the boxes for me. Let me know what you think. Speaking of cheap midfielder differentials who also play in Game Week 29, let's talk about Ethan Nwaneri, who has been brilliant in the last couple of game weeks. Obviously, he's taking the spot of Saka, and you would think that when Saka's back fit, then his place does come into question, or maybe he gets shifted over to the left-hand side, for instance. But at 17 years old, he's playing way beyond his years. The amount of professionalism and calmness he has on the ball is really quite something, and we might have a potential superstar on our hands here. At 4.5 million, you're not going to get any cheaper than that in the midfield. Of course, massively differential as well, but it's beyond that. He's playing for Arsenal, who are, of course, a good attacking side. And even in the most recent match in Game Week 25, he was running the show. He was the best player on the pitch. Obviously, Marino needs a bit of a shout out for scoring 2 goals off the bench, and a few managers might want to go there, but I don't think you can reliably bet that he's going to be starting as centre forward from here on out. Obviously, he might get another run out against West Ham at home, but he's not a dedicated forward in FPL. He's not a player that I can reliably or confidently put my name behind right now. Whereas Nwaneri, on the right-hand side, with injury doubts persisting for Arsenal, he could and should continue to start games down that right-hand side. And the data's looking pretty good for, again, a 4.5 million asset. The next fixture against West Ham is another good opportunity. Granted, after that, Nottingham Forest away from home isn't the best. But crucially, then they go up against Man United away and Chelsea at home in that Game Week 29 fixture, where again, they're guaranteed to play, where a lot of other teams, other teams won't be playing. And after that, Game Week 30 against Fulham. It's a decent little run. It doesn't get any cheaper than Nwaneri. So if you wanted to maybe take some money out of a fourth or a fifth midfielder and redistribute it elsewhere, for example, Erling Haaland, as much as he's been a non-issue in recent weeks, he has been in a rich vein of goal-scoring form, a little bit underappreciated because none of us have really owned him, but come Game Week 29, I'm telling you right now, he's going to become much more popular because he plays in Game Week 29 with Brighton at home, and that's probably one of the best captaincy options that week. Then afterwards, it's Leicester away from home in Game Week 30. So some of you might get him in on a free hit, but then not have him in Game Week 30. Those of us who are maybe looking at using transfers through Game Week 29 are going to want, or potentially want at least, to get that money freed up from other positions to spend it on Erling Haaland in Game Week 29. Now, Nwaneri and of course Ouattara, who I've already talked about, are cheap midfielders with good data and they should keep starting games, who crucially play in Game Week 29. They might be the answer to unlocking Erling Haaland up front for you. So don't lock it in just yet, of course, but Nwaneri and to a lesser extent Ouattara and a few others that I'm going to talk about could give you the money to upgrade a striker to Erling Haaland and potentially captain him. If you wanted to have him, you might not, come Game Week 29 and then crucially Game Week 30 against Leicester as well. So, of course, I've just discussed the tantalising proposition of bringing in Erling Haaland ahead of Game Week 29 and 30, but you might be sat there thinking, well, what's really the need? He's over 7 million more expensive than another Man City forward who is one of the top scorers or the top returners around Europe this season. And at just 7 million looks great value for money. Of course, every content creator out there is going to be talking about Omar Marmoush this week. Obviously, he's just scored a hat-trick against Newcastle. That's quite noisy. It was off of 0.59 XG, so it was an overperformance. But on the eye, having watched it back on Match of the Day, as you do, he was absolutely phenomenal. He looks like a player that is one of the top scorers in Europe this season. The confidence is flowing through him, and Man City seem to have found a position that works really well for him. I wouldn't quite call him a striker for City. He's playing more off the left wing at the moment, but in attacking phases, what he's doing is ducking more inside, pairing up with Erling Haaland, where Erling Haaland sort of drags the centre-backs backwards. Omar Marmoush drops inside a little bit and then springs the offside trap against the high line. He exploited that several times against Newcastle, found himself in pockets of space in that kind of cam number 10 role that Foden likes to use as well. And what it gave him is a ton of time on the ball to get his shots off, to spring in behind one of the centre-backs that is taken up by Erling Haaland. And it meant that he had plenty of opportunities for shots on goal, but also chance creation as well. And as you can see in the underlying data, XG of 0.36, XA of 0.21, that's really, really decent. It's over 0.5 XGI per 90. Again, for a 7 million forward, that's very decent. Okay, he's not on penalties. That is obviously one mark against him. But when you're a 7 million forward for a team as potent going forward as Man City, it's only a matter of time before the attacking returns were to come. This guy loves getting his shots off from all different angles. He's very selfish in front of goal, which at times might be frustrating for the likes of Haaland or Foden. But if you're looking at him as an FPL proposition, it's pretty much big green tick for him, because every time he gets the ball on the inside, anywhere near the goal, he's going to be trying to get the shots off. And now he's scored a few, obviously all in one game, but now he's scored a few, the confidence will be flowing. And even though Liverpool's next up, after that, it's Spurs who are leaky. Nottingham Forest, okay, that won't be easy. But after that, like I mentioned with Haaland, it's Brighton in Game Week 29, and then Leicester away in 30. So if you're sat there thinking, I would love to have a Man City striker, Erling Haaland is really expensive, it might mean that I have to sell the likes of Palmer or Salah. Isak as well will be on the chopping block. Whereas Marmoush, you can get to much more comfortably without necessarily having to sell Salah or Palmer, maybe not even Isak as well. He's starting games regularly, he's getting good minutes, he's one of the top scorers in Europe this season, and he's finally started to find the back of the net for City. I quite like it, it's going to be differential, the ownership will rise, but I still don't imagine it will be above 10-15% come game week 29, unless he continues to score hat-tricks every single week. So as a differential, if you're not convinced that Erling Haaland provides the value for money, yes, everyone's going to be talking about him because he just scored a hat-trick, but don't overlook him just because of that hype either. He could still come good and could still be a very good asset up until game week 30, when a lot of us, of course, are looking at wildcarding anyway. So another player that I've got my eye on closely over the next couple of game weeks is Matheus Cunha, who yet again had a really good game against Liverpool, scored a goal, fantastically taken finish, making it 2 goals in his last 2 league games. And he's got 12 goals this season with 4 assists, so 16 attack and returns. For someone under 7 million, especially someone as talismanic as he is, could be a bit of a cheat code over the next few game weeks. Now, Bournemouth away isn't a great time to be buying necessarily. Obviously, Bournemouth's defence is pretty good. But if anyone scores for Wolves right now, it does seem to be Matheus Cunha. Then after that, we've got a great run for Wolves. It goes into Fulham at home, followed by Everton at home. Then crucially, that game week 29 fixture against Southampton away. So they'll be playing. He'll be one of the popular forwards going into that game week. And after that as well, West Ham at home too. So you don't need to be getting rid of him straight away afterwards either. So he seems like he's going to be a really popular pick for anyone not on a free hit in game week 29. Obviously, those of you who are going to look at free hitting that week can just bring him in specifically for the Southampton fixture, which is undoubtedly the best one of this next patch of 5 fixtures for Wolves. However, what we've seen so far from Cunha this season is not only attacking returns, but also bonus points by the bucket load. Every time he gets any sort of attack and return, he does seem to have bonus points attached to it because he's so creative. He's definitely the main force driving Wolves forwards in any attacking phases. Anything runs through him. So what that means is that the bonus point system really favours him, and if he gets any attacking return, especially because Wolves are very unlikely to be keeping that many clean sheets as well, so bonus points rarely go towards any of their back line, we're looking at a 4-point goal with another 2-3 bonus points attached, or any assist usually comes with a bonus point or 2 as well. So this guy, obviously the data isn't elite. It's not bad. It's just under 0.5 XGI per 90. But when you've also got the bonus point upside and these fixtures to come, I think he's going to be a really popular pick over the next few game weeks. But even in game week 26, mainly if Gakpo, as an example, is still out injured ahead of Man City away. Even if he's not, Man City away followed by Newcastle isn't a great 2 fixtures for Liverpool. So Gakpo might be a sell, especially if he is injured, by the way. We'll obviously find out in the midweek how serious it is. But he missed today's fixture against Wolves. Obviously, Cunha's a little bit cheaper. It might help you afford moves elsewhere. And it's a good long-term buy if you're not looking at free hitting in game week 29 as well. So Cunha is a player that is high on my watch list going into game week 26. He might well be a buy for me, especially if Gakpo's out. But even if not, over the next few game weeks, I'll be looking at moving him in ahead of that game week 29 and even game week 30 fixture against Southampton, then West Ham. So if you're out there looking for a 1-week punt because you're chasing rank or you've got a free couple of transfers to use, then honestly, look no further than Brighton assets. Southampton are all at sea at the moment. Southampton away for Brighton in game week 26, and Southampton's underlying defensive data at home is by far the worst in the league. I think it's 1 XG per 90, behind the second worst team. I think that's West Ham, and they're conceding almost 3 goals a game on average in the XG totals. So if you're looking for a cheap midfielder, Yankuba Minteh for a 1-week punt might not be the worst shout. Now, of course, until recently, his reliability of starting was fairly low, but he has started the last 2, scored 2 against Chelsea, and the confidence is definitely flowing. If you weren't that convinced in Minteh, then maybe you could look at a Mitoma instead. But I've got a funny feeling about Minteh, and I don't think too many people are going to be talking about him. Yes, he just scored 2 goals, but the ownership I don't really see rising because until recently, he hasn't been starting that many games. He has had little injuries here or there during the season, but he did come from Newcastle with a lot of promise. I think it's taken him maybe a little bit longer than we expected to maybe secure himself a spot in that starting 11, and he hasn't been that consistent. But recently he's been much better, got a goal and assist against United, 2 goals against Chelsea. Southampton is that low-hanging fruit, and if you wanted a 1-week punt, under 1% owned as well, there's massively high upside. The data is really, really strong. 0.27 XG, 0.29 XA per 90. That's closing in on 0.6 XGI per 90 for a 5 million midfielder. We've talked about Ouattara. We've talked about Nwaneri as well. He's competing with both of them and has a better fixture than either of them in Game Week 26. So I probably wouldn't look at this as a long-term pick because his minutes... If he has one bad game, then obviously we're going to be a little bit concerned that he might come back out of the side. But the upside is huge. He's highly touted and the data is also pretty good as well. Now, if you wanted a more secure pick, you look at Mitoma. He comes in a little bit more expensive than Minteh, but you're paying for that security of starts. But again, I've just got a little bit of a good feeling about Minteh. I had him at the start of the season. He's highly touted. Obviously, the data's really good as well, and I wouldn't have him down as a long-term pick. But if you've got a few free transfers spare, or if you wanted to go a little bit more aggressive in Game Week 26, you can't really go wrong when chasing the upside against a side that have got 9 points in 25 game weeks and have by far the worst home data in the league by a mile as well. It's not even close. So Brighton assets generally, outside of João Pedro, who's been absolutely awful, and I've still got him sat on my bench. I'm really regretting that, by the way. But if you're looking at pretty much anyone else from Brighton, it's looking really, really promising for Game Week 26, and I like Minteh as a differential pick. So if I was looking at buying a defender this week, which, by the way, I could be, then I'd probably look no further than Milos Kerkez. At just 5 million, I think he's still great value for money. He is owned by over 10% of the game now, so the ownership's climbing, but he's by no means a template pick. And although the data doesn't necessarily reflect that of a really attacking fullback, he is getting into some very advanced positions on the pitch. And I don't think it's a surprise that he's already gotten 5 attacking returns so far this season. Obviously, we've already spoken about Bournemouth. They're playing incredibly well. They're on a bit of a European charge right now. And Kerkez is one of the core parts of the machine that is Bournemouth right now. He's one of their best players. He's playing incredibly well and obviously being touted for a move to the likes of Liverpool right now as well, which Bournemouth fans aren't going to be too pleased about. But for this season and over the next few game weeks, I think he's one of the best defenders you can possibly buy. Obviously, Wolves at home is a great chance for clean sheet, potentially attacking returns as well. But Brighton, Spurs after that, not bad whatsoever. Followed by Brentford, Ipswich, both at home. Crucially, plays in Game Week 29, like I've mentioned with a lot of the players today. That's going to be a really big feather in his cap, especially if you're looking at potentially getting rid of the likes of a Trent Alexander-Arnold and saving a bit of money. By the time we get to 29, unless of course you're free hitting, then Kerkez is probably the sensible solution, saves a ton of money, decent enough underlying data, obviously gets the attacking returns, getting into advanced positions, and it's a great run of fixtures all the way through to when a lot of us are looking at wildcarding. And even if you're not, the fixtures, the way they're laid out, it might mean that Bournemouth have a double game week in 33, and you might even want to hold on to him all the way through from now to that double game week in 33 if it were to come. By the way, it's looking pretty likely right now. It's not confirmed. Obviously, it depends whether or not either Bournemouth or Man United get to the semi-final of the FA Cup, but it is looking more likely than not right now. So if we get that far down the line, Kerkez seems like the logical Bournemouth defender to go for. You could, by the way, also look at Huijsen, who's been brilliant as well, a bit cheaper than Kerkez. The attacking data in terms of XG per 90 is actually much better than Kerkez. But for me, out of the two, I think Kerkez is the one that's more consistently in advanced areas during attacking phases of play, obviously outside of set pieces where Huijsen goes forward. But generally speaking, I think Kerkez makes a lot of sense for the money. You could look at maybe going for a slightly cheaper Bournemouth asset, but for me, I think Kerkez is the one that I'd be most looking at going into this run of games. Right then, so to wrap up the video today, I'm going to talk about a player that I honestly didn't expect at any point this season to be recommending as a buy, and that is Norberto Beto, who has scored 4 goals in his last 3 games. The data is looking really, really strong, and the only reason anyone had him in the first place was because of that double game week in 25 as well, but he's come good, and obviously scored 2 in the first game of the double game week against Leicester, scored again against Liverpool, and then against Crystal Palace, all very well taken finishes as well. In the last 3 games, 4 goals, has started the last 4 in the league as well since Dominic Calvert-Lewin went out injured. And the way he's playing, even if Calvert-Lewin was fit, I genuinely don't see any reason why Moyes would switch it up. By the way, Everton are also the form team in the Premier League right now, 13 points from their last 5 games since Moyes came in. At 4.9 million, if you're looking for a cheap striker to maybe enable some moves elsewhere, you can even downgrade from the likes of João Pedro to him because he's even cheaper than him. And it's an option that I'm genuinely considering ahead of Game Week 26. Although Man United at home on paper isn't the best fixture, Everton's form, and considering the amount of injuries that Man United have, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Beto was able to score against them. After that, Brentford away from home. We know it's not easy when you go to the G-Tech, but again, Everton in great form. Brentford are leaky, so again, wouldn't be surprised. And he's only 4.9 million, so you're not expecting a goal every single week from a player of that sort of value. But after that, it's Game Week 28 against Wolves away, West Ham at home in 29, so very playable in that blank Game Week 29 fixture. After that, okay, fine, Liverpool away from home, but he has just scored against them. The data at 0.5 XG per 90 suggests that he's running at about an expected goal every other game. And there's just no way that I see him getting benched at the moment. We know that strikers are former players, and when they're feeling confident, they're feeling comfortable, the chances flow to them. They're more likely than not, as we've seen with Chris Wood all season and with Mateta as of late. If they're feeling confident in front of goal, they only need a couple of shots a game to bag a return or 2. Beto is the latest in a long line of form strikers this season. And I genuinely think at 4.9 million, he could be a bit of a game breaker over the next 4 game weeks if you buy him early. It's just whether or not you think that that continues for the next few game weeks all the way through Game Week 29. Now, the reason that I might not be buying him this game week isn't because he plays for Everton or he might come out of the side. It's just because there are 3 other strikers that I've got my eye on that ideally I want by Game Week 29, that being Cunha, Wood and Erling Haaland. And if I buy Beto now, then I have to rule out bringing in one of those 3. But maybe I'm just being a little bit stubborn there. Maybe I could go without someone like a Cunha. Who knows? Maybe even without an Erling Haaland. If I bring in Beto, then I can release funds elsewhere, have a stronger 11 overall, and possibly over the next 4 fixtures, it pays off really nicely. So let me know in the comments below whether you think Beto's just a bit of a flash in the pan, which he absolutely could be, but the form is good and the data is matching it as well. So I would be interested to know whether or not you think he's going to be a reliable pick over the next 4 game weeks or so, or whether or not he's just going to take a bit of a nosedive and this is just a little bit of a rich vein of form that is going to die out over the next couple of game weeks. Now, as we reach the end of today's video, do let me know what you think of all of today's picks, and of course, comment the names of any players that I haven't talked about that you'd like me to discuss, and I'll try and get back to you before the Game Week 26 deadline. If you enjoyed today's video, leave a like, hit subscribe, and you won't miss out on any future content, and I'll see you later on this week as we run through my transfer plans and my team selection videos before we hit the Game Week 26 deadline.